She was just a receptionist, mocked, forgotten, and betrayed by her own father. But when a mysterious billionaire walked into the lobby and called her his wife, Eliza Monroe's life flipped upside down. What began as a contract turned into a whirlwind of buried secrets, stolen legacies, and a fight for justice that shook an entire corporation. Will she rise above the lies or lose everything again? This is a story of courage, redemption, and unexpected love. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Inside the sleek, glass-walled headquarters of Monroe Industries, Eliza Monroe sat behind the reception desk, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the edge of her faded gray blouse. The hum of conversations, the clicking of heels across marble floors, and the distant chime of the elevator echoed through the lobby. But all Eliza could hear was the thud of her own heartbeat. At 25, she was a quiet figure in a world that never stopped reminding her she didn't belong. Her soft brown hair was tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and the name tag pinned to her blouse felt heavier than it should, like a label that screamed charity case in a building built on greed and legacy. She'd taken the receptionist job 6 months ago, not because she dreamed of greeting guests, but because this was the only way she could stay close to the empire her mother had helped build before it was stolen away. It was just past 10 a.m. when the routine staff meeting was called, and reluctantly, Eliza picked up a stack of printed agendas and made her way toward the glass conference room. The doors were already open, the polished table surrounded by executives in sharp suits and smug expressions. She kept her eyes down as she stepped inside, trying to stay invisible, but that hope shattered the moment Miranda Clark's voice sliced through the air. "Well, look who finally joined us," Miranda sneered from across the room. The senior manager stood tall and poised, a vision of expensive taste in her navy designer suit. Her blonde hair was coiled into a flawless bun, and her green eyes shimmered with cruelty. "Nice blouse, Eliza. Did you pick that up at a thrift shop, or was it a donation bin this time?" Laughter erupted around the table, soft but sharp. Eliza froze, her cheeks flushed red as she tightened her grip on the papers. She didn't reply. What was there to say? Miranda wasn't just a bully. She was protected, admired, and worst of all, untouchable. Eliza moved down the row, handing out the agendas in silence, trying not to let the sting in her chest show. But Miranda wasn't finished. "Honestly, I still don't understand why we let her stick around. I mean, she's not exactly boardroom material, just a receptionist with a famous last name, a walking PR liability." A few people chuckled again. Eliza forced herself not to cry. She looked up, her eyes drifting toward the head of the table, toward Vincent Monroe, her father, the chairman, and the man who'd once promised her mother the world. Now he just looked bored. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his suit immaculate, and his gaze cold. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. Eliza hoped, prayed for some recognition, even the faintest hint of care. But Vincent merely shifted in his chair and muttered, "If you can't handle the pressure, Eliza, the door is always open." It was like a slap. Her breath caught, and she lowered her gaze, shoving the final few papers into trembling hands before slipping out of the room. Her vision blurred with unshed tears as she returned to the reception desk, ducking behind the counter. "I won't let them break me," she whispered to herself. Not for them, for Mom. Her mother, Evelyn Monroe, had died when Eliza was just 10, leaving behind a legacy woven into every corner of the company. But after her death, Vincent had erased her as efficiently as he signed business deals, cutting Eliza out of everything but a minor share in the company, just enough to remind her of what she didn't have. That share bound her here like a chain, and today, that chain burned. The next morning arrived with gray skies and an ache in her stomach. Eliza stepped through the lobby doors, bracing herself for another battle. She hadn't even put her bag down when Miranda's heels clicked aggressively across the marble, her eyes alight with malice. "Oh, you're still here?" she spat. "I figured you'd crawl back to whatever hole you came from. Guess you enjoy being the office joke." Before Eliza could respond, the glass doors behind her slid open with a soft hiss. A tall man stepped into the lobby, sharp in a tailored black suit, a leather briefcase in hand, his presence arresting. Conversations hushed, heads turned, Even Miranda straightened her posture, flashing a saccharine smile. "Welcome to Monroe Industries. Can I help?" But the man didn't even glance at her. He walked straight to Eliza's desk, eyes locking onto hers with quiet intensity. "Eliza," he said, his voice calm, confident, and unmistakably familiar. "Are you okay?" She blinked, confused. Before she could speak, Miranda let out a bitter laugh. "What's this? Your imaginary boyfriend come to rescue you?" The man turned to her, his expression hard as granite. "No one speaks to my wife like that," he said. A stunned silence fell over the lobby. Eliza's breath caught. Miranda's jaw dropped. And Vincent Monroe, from his office window above, looked down just in time to see Damon Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Ventures, stand beside the daughter he had tried to erase. The day after Damon Sinclair's declaration rocked the lobby of Monroe Industries, the building pulsed with tension. Eliza Monroe sat stiffly behind the reception desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to ignore the way her coworkers avoided her gaze. Whispers slid like smoke through the air, soft, cutting words that followed her every move. "Gold digger," they murmured. "Fake wife. Lucky nobody." Even the security guard, who used to nod kindly at her each morning, now kept his eyes down when she walked in. Eliza hadn't spoken to Damon since that moment. After the lobby erupted in gasps and disbelief, he had simply left. No explanation, no warning. Just a bold claim and the flash of a marriage certificate that felt more real than she was ready to admit. But the words still echoed in her mind. "No one speaks to my wife like that." It shouldn't have meant anything. It was a contract, a performance. And yet, her chest ached like it meant everything. Her phone buzzed just after 5, a message from an unknown number. "Meet me. Café Linden, 1 block east, 6 p.m. She stared at it, debating, heart twisting with doubt, but curiosity won, and by 6 o'clock, Eliza was pushing open the door to a small corner cafe. It was warm inside, the hum of conversation low and comforting, the scent of fresh coffee grounding her nerves. Damon sat alone near the back, his posture relaxed, but his hazel eyes sharp the moment he spotted her. He rose slightly as she approached, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," Eliza replied, her voice taut with unease. "You left me with no explanation? People think I'm a liar. That I tricked you, or—" "You didn't," Damon cut in gently. "I should have explained sooner. I didn't expect to show up like that, but when I heard what your father and Miranda were doing, I couldn't stay silent." She folded her arms. "So you just stormed in and called me your wife in front of everyone?" "Well," he said with a faint smile, "you're my wife. Legally, at least." Eliza leaned forward, her voice low. "We both know this marriage was a deal. 10,000 a month to keep the board off your back. You needed a public image, and I needed an escape. I signed for protection. Not, whatever that was." Damon nodded slowly, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "I know, but there's more to why I chose you, more to why I did this in the first place." She frowned, waiting. "I met your mother once," he said, his voice quieter now. "I was 10. On the streets, I'd run away from my foster home. It was snowing, and I hadn't eaten in days. Your mom found me outside a diner, bought me a sandwich, and sat with me until the police came. She didn't judge me, didn't ask anything in return, just kindness." Eliza's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Her mother had always been that way, gentle, generous, almost heartbreakingly so. Hearing it from Damon, from a memory she'd never known, made her feel like she was touching something sacred. "She never told me that," Eliza whispered. "She probably never thought it was worth mentioning. But I never forgot. When I saw you at that same diner months ago, your name tag, the way you smiled at the barista who spilled coffee, I saw her in you. That's why I offered the deal. I wanted to help you. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just finally having the chance to repay a debt I owed." Her throat tightened, her emotions swelling like a tide. "Why didn't you just tell me this from the beginning? Would you have believed me?" he asked gently. "Or would you have run the other way?" She hesitated. Probably the latter. There was a part of her that still wanted to run now. "But you have to know," he continued, "I'm not here to control you. I'm not your father. I'm not Miranda. I'm here because I care. I can't stand what they're doing to you. And I don't care if this marriage started as a contract. I'll protect you anyway." Eliza stared at him, her mind spinning. This was supposed to be a business transaction. a loophole in the power games Vincent played, but now it felt like the lines had blurred. She didn't know whether Damon was a guardian angel or a man haunted by his past, seeking redemption in her shadow. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You're not what I expected." He smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Outside, the city moved in fast forward, neon lights flickering through the cafe windows. Inside, Eliza Monroe sat in a quiet corner across from a man she barely knew. Her husband on paper, maybe more in spirit. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. 2 days later, the boardroom of Monroe Industries was humming with tension. Eliza Monroe sat stiffly at the long polished table, her shoulders squared, though her heart hammered in her chest. Her blue blouse, one Damon had sent her, hugged her frame with quiet elegance, a small armor in a war far bigger than herself. Around her, shareholders murmured, flipping through packets prepared by Miranda Clark. The woman stood at the head of the room, poised like she owned it, her blonde hair twisted perfectly, her green eyes gleaming with confidence. "We're on the brink of securing a transformative deal with Sinclair Ventures," Miranda announced, her voice smooth as silk. "Our conversations with Mr. Sinclair have been productive. He's agreed to invest, and with that capital infusion, Monroe Industries will return to its rightful place at the top." The room nodded in approval, a few scattered claps breaking out. Eliza gripped the arms of her chair. It was a lie. Damon hadn't agreed to anything. She knew that much. But speaking up felt like walking into a fire. Her father, Vincent Monroe, sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, but Eliza could sense the smugness behind his cool exterior. "Well done, Miranda," Vincent said, his tone laced with approval. "That's the kind of initiative this company needs." Eliza opened her mouth, but the words lodged in her throat. Until the door burst open. Every head turned as Damon Sinclair strode into the boardroom, dressed in a charcoal suit that cut clean lines against the room's dim lighting. His hazel eyes didn't waver as he walked straight to the table and set down a leather briefcase. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice calm but razor sharp. "There is no deal." A collective gasp moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. Miranda's face paled, but she recovered quickly, a brittle laugh escaping her lips. "Mr. Sinclair," she said smoothly, "perhaps we can discuss this in private." "No need," Damon interrupted, opening the briefcase. "Everyone should hear this." He pulled out a thick file and spread it across the table. "Sinclair Ventures pulled out of negotiations weeks ago, and here's why." He slid the documents forward. "These are financial records from 15 years ago, proving that Vincent Monroe embezzled millions from Monroe Industries. Funds meant for expansion, for innovation, siphoned into private offshore accounts. Some of those funds were co-owned by Evelyn Monroe, Eliza's mother, and my mother, Eleanor Sinclair. They were the original visionaries behind this company. Vincent forged documents, stole their shares, and forced them out." The room exploded in murmurs. Eliza froze. She hadn't known the full scope of it. Her mother and Damon's had been partners. She looked at Damon, who hadn't taken his eyes off Vincent. Her father's jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the table. "This is slander," Vincent growled. "Fabrications meant to discredit me." "The documents were reviewed by forensic accountants," Damon replied coolly. "I have legal affidavits and independent audits to back every figure. You left Evelyn Monroe and Eleanor Sinclair to die broke while you built your empire on their backs." Eliza felt like she couldn't breathe. Her mother's tired eyes, her worn hands, her soft apologies for why things had to be so hard, they all crashed into her like a wave. Vincent had stolen not just a company, but a future. Miranda stepped forward, her voice shrill. "He's bluffing. You just want to destroy this company because you're married to her." Damon turned to her with ice in his voice. "I married her to protect her from people like you. But this is bigger than a marriage contract." One of the senior shareholders, a man with a bald head and a piercing gaze, leaned forward. "Vincent, these numbers, they don't lie. Explain this." "I don't owe anyone an explanation," Vincent snapped. "This is my company." "Not anymore," Damon said. "Sinclair Ventures' withdrawal exposes your debts. You're vulnerable. The board can remove you." "I move to vote," the bald man said, effective immediately. Hands shot up around the room. Eliza watched in stunned silence as one after another, the shareholders turned their backs on her father. Vincent's face collapsed into disbelief as the vote passed. He stood, staggered, then stormed out of the room. Miranda clutched her clipboard, panic blooming in her eyes. "This is her fault," she hissed, pointing at Eliza. "She brought him here to ruin us." Eliza stood slowly, her voice trembling but clear. "No, you ruined yourselves. I'm just finally taking back what's mine." She didn't wait for Miranda's response. She walked out, her footsteps steady, her heart pounding. Damon followed her out into the hallway, his voice softer now. "Are you okay?" She turned to face him, emotions rushing up like a tide. "Why didn't you tell me all of this before?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I didn't want you to think I was using you. I came to destroy him. That was the plan. But somewhere along the way, I saw you." Eliza looked into his eyes and for the first time saw no armor, no agenda, just truth. The hallway felt quieter now. The weight of the years lifted slightly from her shoulders. And in that silence, she knew everything had changed. The halls of Monroe Industries felt like a different world now, emptier, stripped of the illusions Eliza Monroe had lived under for so long. Her father was gone, removed in a storm of truth and scandal. Miranda had vanished too, her clipped heels no longer echoing with superiority. But even in the aftermath, Eliza couldn't feel at ease. She stood outside Vincent's office, her pulse steady but her mind buzzing. She had one final thing to reclaim, one piece left of the life her mother was meant to have. The penthouse. She stepped inside without knocking. The office was a mess. Boxes lined the floor, files spilling out in disarray. Vincent Monroe sat behind his massive desk, no longer pristine. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, and his once coiffed hair looked like it hadn't seen a comb in hours. He didn't look up at first, just kept taping a box shut with jerky, impatient movements. When he did glance at her, the bitterness in his eyes was like a blade. "Come to gloat?" he muttered. "No," Eliza said quietly but firmly. "I came to take back what you stole." He leaned back with a bitter scoff, folding his arms. "I stole nothing. Everything I built was mine. Your mother was a dreamer, not a leader. She didn't have what it took to run a company." Eliza's throat tightened, but she held her ground. She had vision and heart. You had ambition and greed. She created this company with you. And when she died, you erased her. You erased me. Vincent said nothing, only tapped his fingers against the desk in an impatient rhythm. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, legal documents Damon had handed her after the board meeting. She slid them across the desk. "The penthouse, the one she loved, the one you moved into the minute she was gone. You forged documents to take it. It was hers. It's mine now." Vincent's expression tightened. "You think some papers are going to scare me into handing over my home?" "Not scare," Eliza said calmly. "Expose. Damon's lawyers are ready. You're drowning in debt. The creditors are circling. You won't win this in court, or the press." He stared at the folder, then at her. For a moment, a flicker of something passed through his eyes. Not regret, not quite. Maybe it was memory, but it vanished quickly. He yanked a drawer open, retrieved a deed, scribbled a signature, and flung it at her. The paper fluttered to the floor. "Take it," he spat. "You're just like her, stubborn and naive." Eliza bent down, picked up the deed and slipped it into her bag. Her voice trembled, but it didn't crack. "Goodbye, Vincent." As she turned to leave, he called out behind her. "You'll regret this." She didn't look back. Downstairs, the lobby was quiet, empty, but not for long. Miranda Clark stood near the reception desk, her purse clutched tightly, her bun coming undone. Her eyes snapped to Eliza like daggers. "This is your fault," Miranda hissed, stepping forward. "You and that husband of yours destroyed everything. I gave my life to this company, and now I have nothing." Eliza didn't back away this time. She kept her voice calm. "You lied. You bullied people. You helped Vincent cover up theft. You made your bed." Miranda's lips twisted. "You think this is over? I'll make you pay for this." Eliza raised her chin. "I already paid. With years of silence, of being invisible. Not anymore." Miranda glared for a beat longer, then stormed out, her heels slapping the marble like a final tantrum. That evening, Eliza stood in front of the penthouse building, an elegant tower of steel and glass in the heart of Manhattan. She held the key in her hand for a long moment before slipping it into the lock. The door swung open with a soft click, revealing a dusty but beautiful interior. The space was frozen in time, furniture covered, sunlight streaking across the hardwood floors. She stepped inside slowly, her footsteps echoing as memories swirled around her like ghosts. She walked to a corner where an old painting still hung, swirls of blue and green her mother had painted when Eliza was a little girl. Her fingers brushed the canvas, and tears welled in her eyes. "I got it back, Mom," she whispered. "For you." A quiet shuffle behind her made her turn. Damon stood in the doorway, still in his suit, his tie loosened. His hazel eyes searched hers. "I figured you'd come here," he said softly. Eliza smiled faintly, her voice hoarse. "I needed to. I had to face it alone." "You didn't have to," he replied, "but I understand why you did." She nodded, wiping her face with the sleeve of her blouse. "You really came back?" He crossed the room, his steps slow, deliberate. "You mean more to me than all of this. I wasn't going to let you face this moment without someone who sees you." His arms wrapped around her, warm and solid, and she let herself sink into them for just a second, just enough to know she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The city light stretched endlessly beyond the balcony where Eliza Monroe stood, her hands resting lightly on the cool metal railing. Manhattan pulsed below her, vibrant, alive, unconcerned with the chaos that had consumed her world these past weeks. The breeze tugged gently at her brown hair as she gazed across the skyline from the penthouse her mother once called home. Behind her, the space was no longer a museum of loss. It was hers now. Earned, reclaimed, and quiet. Damon Sinclair stepped onto the balcony beside her, his jacket unbuttoned, his hair tousled by the wind. He didn't say anything at first, simply joined her in looking out across the glowing cityscape. For a moment, they stood in silence, not as business partners or contract-bound companions, but as two people who had walked through fire and were finally catching their breath. "It's over," Eliza said softly, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "My father, Miranda, the company, all of it." Damon nodded. "The creditors are moving in, the board's starting over. Vincent has nothing left to fight with, and Miranda's, well, she'll land somewhere, but not here." She turned to him then, her eyes tired but clear. "You gave me all the tools, the proof, the lawyers. You handed me my mother's legacy back." "You did the hard part," he replied. "You stood up to him, you faced her, you walked into that boardroom and didn't flinch. I just handed you what was already yours." Eliza offered a small, wry smile. "Maybe, but it still matters." Damon stepped a little closer, his shoulder brushing hers. "What about us?" he asked, his voice low. "I meant what I said in that boardroom. I love you, Eliza. This started as revenge, I'll never deny that. But it became something else. You became something else." She looked away, down at the streets far below. Her heart fluttered uneasily. "I was alone for so long," she said quietly. "After my mom died, Vincent left me with a name and a sliver of a stake in his empire. I fought just to stay visible. And then you came out of nowhere and flipped my entire world upside down." "I didn't mean to flip it," Damon said almost shyly. "I just didn't want to see you disappear." "I don't know if I can trust it yet," she admitted. "You were a stranger, a billionaire with a plan, and I was just a receptionist, desperate not to be erased." "You were never just anything," he said. "I saw that the second we met. You were holding everything together with nothing but grit. You didn't need rescuing, you just needed a reason to fight louder." Eliza studied him then, really studied him. Gone was the polished tycoon with a hidden motive. In front of her now was a man who had once been a scared kid, saved by a stranger's kindness, who had spent his life trying to repay that debt with more than money, who had watched her be torn down and chose again and again to stand in front of her when the world struck hard. Her voice was soft. "I'm not ready to say it back." "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "I'll wait, as long as it takes." Her eyes shimmered, the weight in her chest lifting. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Then stay." He smiled, a quiet kind of joy settling in his features. "Always." The city hummed around them as if echoing her relief. For the first time in years, Eliza didn't feel like a ghost in her own life. She could still hear her father's voice in distant memory, cutting, cold. Miranda's laughter echoing in the halls, but it didn't touch her the way it once did. Their power was gone. What remained was this, the deed in her name, the truth out in the open, and Damon beside her, not out of obligation, but by choice. They stood together at the railing, their silhouettes cast in the golden light pouring from the windows behind them. Eliza squeezed his hand, her voice almost a whisper. You said you'd spend your life making up for what I lost. Damon turned to her, his grin soft. I did, and I will. She laughed lightly, the sound drifting into the night like a promise of its own. Good, because I plan on holding you to it. He pulled her into his arms, and she didn't resist. His embrace was warm, steady. Her head rested against his chest, and for the first time in so long, she let herself believe in something beyond survival. She believed in tomorrow. As they stood wrapped in one another, Eliza looked out over the skyline, not with fear, but with something close to wonder. Life had tried to bury her in silence and shame, but she had risen, piece by piece, heartbreak by heartbreak, and now at last she was whole. Not because someone saved her, but because she had chosen to fight. Damon had given her a spark, but she had lit the fire. Together, they watched the city glow. A new chapter had already begun. Life lesson from Eliza's story. Eliza Monroe's journey teaches us that true strength often comes not from grand gestures, but from choosing to stand tall when everything and everyone tries to push you down. She was overlooked, underestimated, and betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. But instead of giving in to bitterness or defeat, she chose to rise. With quiet resilience and the courage to speak up, she reclaimed not just a building or a company, but her sense of self-worth. This story is a powerful reminder that we are not defined by where we start or by how others treat us, but by the choices we make when faced with adversity. Sometimes help arrives in unexpected forms, and when it does, it's okay to lean on someone, but it's just as important to face your past, take back your voice, and build your own future. Damon may have opened a door, but Eliza walked through it. That is the essence of growth. Recognizing your pain, standing up to it, and saying, I deserve better, because you do. So to anyone out there feeling small, invisible, or powerless, remember Eliza. Remember that you are capable of far more than they let you believe. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's healing, thriving, and choosing to keep going. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to hear your story, and if this touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Your next chapter might be just a click away.